Hi y'all, I hope everyone is doing as well as can be today. So today I thought I'd talk about 5.5 years in a wheelchair.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
So it's been 5.5 years that I've been using a wheelchair, mainly full-time, aside from like a few steps in my apartment. I was 27 when I started using a wheelchair, about to be 28, and I am now 32. It's been quite a learning experience to be in a wheelchair. It's been very humbling. I've learned a lot, like I said, of things that I wouldn't have otherwise learned if I wasn't in a wheelchair. I learned pretty quickly that this world is not catered for disabled, sick people. This world is absolutely 100% made for healthy, able-bodied individuals, and that's something that I never even contemplated before I became wheelchair bound. I have been using a wheelchair mostly full-time. That is pretty much all the time other than when I'm in my apartment, a few steps. I can walk a few steps without my wheelchair. First of all, for those that don't know, I use a wheelchair for several reasons. Of course, everyone has their own reason to use a wheelchair. For me, the number one reason that I use it is because of my POTS. So POTS is something that makes you unable to stand without your blood pooling, and therefore your heart rate skyrockets to try to compensate for the lack of blood flowing up to your heart and your brain. So this super high heart rate is generally, for me, combined with a low blood pressure. When I stand, my blood pressure drops, sometimes dangerously low. Sometimes I faint or get very close to fainting, or sometimes I've even gone into shock. So that is the number one reason I can't stand for long, because of my POTS and my vitals and my hypovolemia, which is not enough blood in my body, which goes along with the POTS. I also get really nauseated, really weak. I have muscle weakness as well. So my muscle weakness is another reason why I have trouble standing and walking for long. That goes along with the POTS. I am on a muscle strengthener, which helps. I have built back muscles in my legs. They were atrophied a couple years ago. They're not Gumby legs anymore. The third reason is because I have an incomplete spinal cord injury, as well as degenerative disc disease, herniated discs, spinal stenosis, osteoarthritis, and just a bunch of problems in my spine in general. I had spine surgery a year and a half ago, an emergency lumbar discectomy. So I have chronic back pain, and that obviously limits my ability to move. And so I use a wheelchair also, not just because of the POTS, but because of my back issues. So quite a few reasons that I use a wheelchair. I started out using it because of POTS, but then the back issues got worse. So yeah, it's kind of just a compounded thing now. I'm not able to walk up more than a few steps, so I use my wheelchair all the time, aside for a little bit in the apartment. And yeah, it's been, it's something I've gotten used to. It's taken a lot of time, but now I love it because it helps me get around. Without the wheelchair, I would literally be just in bed all day, every day, which I'm already in bed most of the time, but I was crawling to the bathroom, which is just a few feet away from my bed, before I had the wheelchair. Before we moved into this apartment, I was crawling up and down the stairs to the point where my knees would be all, burned and dry and blistered. So wheelchair, it's safe to say it's been a big helpful tool for me. Honestly, it's a love-hate relationship, but mostly love, because like I said, it helps me get around. I say love-hate relationship. To be honest, it's mostly because of other people around me kind of not approving, or not approving, but not really being encouraging of me using the wheelchair, at least when I started. Now, of course, everyone knows I need it, so that's a different story, because I've been sick for years. We have found out a lot since I was diagnosed with all of the things I have, and since I first started using the chair. Like I said, mostly the hate part of the love-hate relationship comes from other people not being encouraging of me using it, and I think that was mainly, it was kind of a shock to friends and family. They didn't understand why I needed it, but once they realized that A, I couldn't get around without it, B, it's something I had to come to terms with myself because I need it. And once they realized that, I think they started to more used to the idea of me being in a chair. But especially my mom, it's always been hard for her to come to terms with. Even today, like she's like, oh, just try it. Try to walk a few steps if you can. I'm like, you know what? Who chooses to use a wheelchair? No one. I don't think there's anyone out there that would choose to use a chair if they could walk. Yeah, I think my friends and family not being so supportive and encouraging of me using a wheelchair in the beginning was hard for me as well to come to terms with. It made me kind of second guess, like, do I really need this? Is this something that I should use if I could walk a couple steps? I'm not technically paralyzed, I thought. But then I learned that many people use wheelchairs, people who could walk, people who can't walk. There's many different reasons for people needing wheelchairs. I said I would be bedbound pretty much all the time if I didn't have my wheelchair, so I am so grateful for it. Even if that was the only thing it did for me, that just means the world to me, being able to get out of bed more often. Before I had the wheelchair, I wasn't able to ever cook or make food for myself. Prior to getting sick, I was a baker and a cook. I was always in the kitchen making food and creating recipes. And I really miss that, and honestly, if it wasn't for my chair, I would never get in the kitchen these days. I wouldn't be able to. What I do now is I just sit in my chair and I kind of assist my mom in making whatever we're making. If it's something simple, like a little breakfast, sandwich or a smoothie, if it's a good day, I can prepare it myself, but again, that's thanks to the chair. If I didn't have the chair, I would not be able to stand for long enough to make anything for myself. Maybe a glass of water, and that's it. Once I got over the internalized ableism that stemmed from other people questioning the need of my wheelchair, then I just embraced it because, like I said, it helped me do so much more. It helped me get out of bed, it helped me cook, bake, and do some of the things that I used to do and then had to give up before I had the wheelchair. I also have a cane and a rolling walker, but they do not help me as much as the wheelchair, especially considering I'm not able to stand up very long. So how did I get my chair? So first of all, when I first started using my wheelchair, it was my own decision because I got to the point that I could barely get out of bed and couldn't stand up for very long after my POTS started to get more severe. So I went on Craigslist, and with the help of my mother, we paid for a used wheelchair, and it was just your basic manual wheelchair. It was just enough to get me by for a few years before I was hospitalized. I've had many hospitalizations, probably I think it was for my back, which I've had many hospitalizations because of my back. I had a doctor write me up a prescription for a wheelchair because the wheelchair I had before was falling apart at that point. So yeah, they just wrote me up a wheelchair for another one. I was gonna need a PT, a physical therapy evaluation at first, but then they decided that I didn't need the PT eval. So at the point I was so weak that I wasn't even able to do physical therapy. Next thing you know, a medical supplier called me up at home. I called my mom up at home. I was still in the hospital actually while this happened. Next thing I know, it was delivered to my house, and by the time I went home, it was there. So now I'm going to talk about some wheelchair pet peeves that I have. 1, people moving my chair without asking me. So this one is kind of a big one, and I think that anyone who uses a wheelchair would agree with me on this one. Please don't move me in my chair without my permission or without me asking. A wheelchair for a person who's disabled is like an extension of themselves. So if I was able-bodied and standing up, you wouldn't push me or move me. Therefore, do not move an adult who's in a wheelchair, who's capable of moving themselves. I've had a lot taken away from me as far as my independence, so I like to be as independent as I can be when I can be. I had friends and family do this a lot, and I think they do it without thinking. They just move me or they push me, and they probably are just trying to be helpful, so I'm very thankful for that. I'd rather you just ask me, hey, do you want me to move you? Hey, where do you want to go? Is this okay? and then I'll just tell you I could move myself, or just hold off, or yes, please, I need the help today. Now, of course, there's days that I'm too weak to move myself, and then I'll have a friend or a family member or caregiver push me. But on days that I'm able to ambulate myself, I really prefer to move myself. 2, people assuming that I can't talk or I am cognitively disabled. So I noticed a lot of people seem to think that if you're in a wheelchair, then you are not as intelligent, or that you're cognitively disabled. So I do have a lot of cognitive dysfunction. I am not as intelligent as I used to be, plain and simple. My IQ has gone down quite a bit since I've gotten mycotoxin disease, but I am able to talk and express myself, thankfully, pretty well most days. I think that my tip for this is just talk to the person and try to get a feel for their cognitive abilities before assuming that they're not going to be able to talk to you. So I've had people just talk to my caregiver, my mom, whoever I'm with, rather than talk to me. And if it's regarding me, I've had like a pharmacist talk to my mom about something that they could have just asked me about because I was right in front of them. This is pretty annoying because I am intelligent, I have a mind of my own, I have thoughts of my own, and I like to express myself. I like to be in charge of my own health care, so, just talk to me. I am perfectly capable of holding a conversation, even though, like I said, some days I really struggle with that. Just don't assume anything. Never assume that someone in a wheelchair can't talk for themselves. 3, people staring. I didn't think I would have to even mention this one because I think most kids are taught this when they're young, that staring is rude. But I think I'm gonna have to mention it because I've found that a lot of people stare at me when I'm out. So I am used to people staring at me by now, but when I first became wheelchair bound, this was something that I kind of had to get used to, and it made me really uncomfortable at first. So basically everyone stares at people in wheelchairs or people with mobility devices. I mean, this is my personal account. I noticed that anytime I'm out, I get a lot of stares, and it's not just like a 3-second stare and then turn away. It's like just staring intently. And I understand if you're a kid, then you're curious. You probably haven't seen many wheelchairs as a child and you're wondering what this thing is. But if you're an adult, you probably know what a wheelchair is, so please don't stare. I ask politely. If you are wondering why I'm in a chair or what's going on, just ask. I really don't mind if you just ask me, "Hi, what's going on? What happened? What's your condition?" It's pretty simple. 4, people praying for me without asking. So this one is kind of weird. I have noticed quite a few people have stopped and prayed for me, either telling me that they're gonna pray for me or just doing it without even saying anything to me. They will come up to me sometimes and say, "Oh, Jesus will heal you," or "just pray and you will be healed," and then they'll start to pray. They'll put their hands over me. Now, I am a big believer. I have very strong faith, and thankfully, my faith has gotten stronger through this struggle that I've gone through, and all the struggles I've gone through, which have been a lot. As much as I love Jesus, and as much as a believer I am, I just find it a little weird when people pray for me without asking, especially when they say that I will be cured magically or miraculously, as if I haven't thought of praying myself. I pray all the time. I love Jesus to pieces, and I do believe and have hope that one day I will get better. Most of my conditions are genetic and they do not have a cure. So with all due respect, if you would like to pray for me, please pray for me to yourself and not over me. If I request a prayer, that's a different story. But just don't go up to somebody disabled and start praying for them without their permission. For one, this is kind of offensive because it's implying that you, the disabled person, are not okay how you are. Yes, I suffer a lot and I wish that I was better all the time, but I have to learn to live with my disabilities and my illnesses because that's the cards that I was dealt. So I'm going to try to make the best of what I have and not try to focus on being miraculously cured because, well, I haven't been cured yet and I've lived with this my whole life. So I think that I'm just going to continue on the way I am. It's also rude just because it's implying that I'm sick because I haven't prayed, or because I'm a sinner, or because I'm bad, or I did something wrong to deserve this. And that is the worst feeling as someone who's sick and disabled, to think that you are sick and your life is this way because you did something wrong, maybe in a past life or something, and that I am not dealing with this because I'm bad. I am dealing with this because it's life. It's just life. Some people are sick, some people are healthy, some people are disabled. I'm not as able-bodied as you. I don't have all of the abilities you have or the average person has. But that doesn't mean I am of lesser value, that there's something wrong with me. It's just life. Diseases happen, illnesses happen, accidents happen. Just embrace your disabled and sick friends and family members and be there for them. And please ask questions before you assume anything, before you move them, or before you decide what's good for them or what's not good for them. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching my little video. I'll see you guys next time, and please give this a like if you liked it, and subscribe to see me on my chronic illness journey. Hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye. On being miraculous, and they'll say, in Jesus' name, you are healed.